With social distancing and successive lockdowns, it seems we're all experiencing loneliness in 2020 a bit more than usual. For some, it's harrowing to go without daily social contact. For others, alone time is relaxing or productive. It seems to be highly subjective. But what's the purpose of feeling lonely? And are there dangers to chronic loneliness? We're going to talk about that and more right now. Hi, you're listening to The Fight Coach, the psychotherapist and the gym mama. FCPGM is a weekly podcast where we discuss important topics that affect you and your family and tips that we suggest that might just help you out. On today's episode, we're discussing the feelings of being lonely. While COVID has certainly amplified these issues, it's not a new phenomenon, but has 2020 given us a chance to learn about loneliness and how to deal with it better? Let's see. I'm joined, of course, by James White of API Clinics, a psychotherapist well-versed in the world of mental health, stress management and anxiety.
How's it going?
Marlene Griffin, aka the Gym Mama, a parent of 3, owner-manager of a busy martial arts and fitness gym and a lifelong martial artist.
Hi there.
My name is Liam O'Griffin. I'm a professional MMA coach and an e-learning developer with an engineering background. If you'd like to follow along with us using our show notes, you can get them at www.fcpgm.com. There you'll find links to our Facebook community page, our Twitter feed, and our Discord server. If you'd like to join the conversation and add your experience and feedback, we'd love to hear from you. So, let's begin. Okay.
Big DJ there.
I know. I've got too many buttons to push now. So, loneliness. Who's lonely?
Help me. So let's look at a few of the definitions. So if you just put into the dictionary definition, it says loneliness is a sadness because one has no friends or company. If you look into Wikipedia's definition, it expands it a little bit into loneliness is an unpleasant emotional response to perceived isolation. And when you look into the realms of the psychological area and the psychotherapy area and stuff, the definitions are a state of being alone, inability to find meaning in one's life, feeling of constant negativity and unpleasantness, or a feeling of disconnection. So they're the definitions. All in all, I suppose the one that we would be talking, or the one that we would generally feel, is that you're on your own, you've no friends, when it isn't necessarily just as simple as that. It's a much, much deeper issue.
I found that, when I thought about this particular subject, loneliness, I think we actually don't appreciate there is a good side to it and there's a bad side to it. So it's like any other emotion or any other feeling. It has its place. It's when we let it dominate our lives that it becomes the problem. Because, it's like it's like yin and yang. To experience great joy and appreciate everybody's company, you probably have to have that time that you miss somebody and that you are feeling a bit lonesome or whatever. So maybe there's a kind of when you could do the definitions, that maybe some people get mixed up between solitude, loneliness, and then the whole part of the whole overwhelming part of real loneliness. Then, we can kind of hit on it for a second, hit on it for a day, hit on it for a week. But when it's there longer than that, is that what we're talking about or thinking about when we talk about loneliness?
Well, that's chronic.
Yeah,
that's at a chronic level. But I think there is, everybody will go through spasms of loneliness in the realms of what you're saying, a couple of hours or a day or 2 days or whatever. But it is when it gets to that level where it becomes, like what Liam said there, is chronic, where it becomes a problem. And when you're saying there's a positive and a negative to it, I'd agree in the realms of yes, there is, if you can use your self-awareness to take notice of the information it's given you, because that's what, if you think about all the different topics that we've talked about in the show, especially around, say, mental health or having challenging thoughts in your mind, it's your body's way of giving you information. And it's what you do with that information will depend or determine where you go with it, whether it becomes a learning experience to grow or a negative experience to affect you in a negative way continually, So, I'd agree.
I also found it quite interesting that, loneliness has become a bigger issue now as you said earlier, with lockdown and things like that. But I think over the last 10 years, loneliness has become a bigger issue. And some of the things that I've been reading and kind of looking at is that, and for not even looking at these things because of loneliness, talking about, other aspects in life, we'll say, where kids need to be entertained constantly, that they're not allowed to get bored. So is that actually highlighting loneliness more because you're raring kids to be around you constantly or with somebody constantly or entertaining, that they actually
I think
that loneliness
a lot
more?
of these things have just come into the forefront of mental health in regards to, it wasn't that we weren't lonely or there wasn't loneliness when we were kids. It's just, I was listening to a topic on the radio today, and it was talking about the generational differences between, say, when we were brought up compared to, say, when Liam was brought up compared to, say, the younger people of today is in late teens, early 20s. And, a lot of it goes around expectation, which we did a show on before. We did a podcast on expectation. And, in the realms of where was there times when we were lonely when we were kids? Probably. But because of the generation we were brought up in and because of stuff that we did, it didn't tend to last that long for whatever reason, and that's what the conversation was today on the radio about generation differences. So I think what's coming to the forefront now is there's so much investigation and research into mental health, which there wasn't before. We've talked about before where if you had, say, some cases of Asperger's or autism, you were just locked away, and you were treated as if you were just mad and there was nobody could do and fill you full of drugs and whatever. Whereas nowadays they've learned that actually this is a thing and there's different ways of helping different people in different ways, do you know what I mean? That you don't have to lock them up, So I think that's where the realm of it is coming. So all of this stuff like loneliness and different mental health issues are becoming more into the news stream and media. Is it for a positive? I don't know, because there is that influence that we talked about, which is the negative of social media news and stuff like that. So, yeah. So
I was looking at a very good video on this that wouldn't that's my first port to call is YouTube always anyway. But there's a video or there's a channel called Kyrgyzstat, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Apparently it's a German word that means the phrase "in a nutshell," and it's a kind of like an psychological explainer channel, and they put like months of research and pack it down with all these kind of cool animations and a lot of fact checking in it, and I find it a very good resource. I have the link to the episode in the show notes, of course. But their breakdown on it was from the point of view of the evolutionary reason or the purpose or the advantage to the perception of loneliness. Just to kind of break it down simply and to paraphrase, a lot of it has to do with tribal and tribal cooperation. So if you were a prehistoric human, and you weren't able to get on with the tribe, well, then you were kind of left out in the dark, no shelter. You weren't able to share in the tribe's food or be groomed by the tribe or mate with the tribe. And then that literally was a death sentence.
Yeah.
So the purpose of loneliness then was to kind of give you a bit of an emotional, a bit of a hormonal reaction to when you're being left out or when you're not fitting in, and that gives you the motivation. And so it's a social, or it's a hormonal signal giving you a social a motivation to seek out social interaction and to fit in. And those who had the experience of loneliness took that signal and got stuck in and became part of the tribe. Those that didn't got lost out in the woods and got eaten by a tiger. And then that's how it kind of stuck with the ones that did survive and pass on their lineage and what have you. But then that's all very fine when we're tribal. But as human civilization evolved into away from the tribal lifestyle and into more kind of settled cities and bigger cities, and in particular the Industrial Revolution and the Renaissance and these kind of massive movements over the last 300 or 400 years, our tribal communities have basically shrunk. You know, whereas you would have a tribe of 50 to 150 hunter-gatherers in like 10,000 years ago or longer. Now you're suddenly having people upping sticks and moving to a city where they're living in a kind of a flat or whatever, and they're working in an industrial complex, and they're in a bed sit, and they don't have the time because they're working all day or they're involved in other things, so they don't have those same quality of social interactions. And then you get the feeling of loneliness for a totally different reason. Mm-hmm. It's not because you're not fitting in, it's because you don't have any social interactions. The work has taken over. In the Renaissance, it was creativity that took over. It was like painters and sculptors and writers and musicians that were spending hours on their craft and not having any social interactions. And then suddenly the whole idea of loneliness came in. So that's just the breakdown. But this video, the Kyrgyzstan video on this actually explains it a lot more eloquently than I can. And it's an interesting... Again, it's similar to some of the other podcasts that we've done where we've taken seemingly negative things, like the feeling of depression, like the feeling of I'm trying to think of anxiety, all of these things. They're signals, nothing more. It's not bad, it's not good, it's a signal. Loneliness is just another signal, and it's what you do with that signal. It determines whether it's a positive or a negative effect. If you feel lonely and then you use that as its original intended meaning or its original intended purpose, which was, I'm feeling lonely, then maybe I should seek out social interaction. Well, then that's actually a positive. If I feel lonely and then you start feeling sorry for yourself and you kind of go into the depths of despair, well, then obviously it's a negative thing.
And that goes back to, do you remember we talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs for humans? There is that need, like we talked about a few times, which is to survive as a human species, we need three things: food and water, shelter, and what's called companionship, which is like that tribal interaction. And it was interesting that you said that, like, you compared it to, say, the Industrial Revolution and the transformation of the human race over the last 200 or 300 years, and the losingness of that that tribal spirit. But I can remember, I don't know, I'm obviously from the big city, Dublin, right? But I can remember in Dublin as a kid, where we used to have, I lived in a cul-de-sac of, I think it's 21 or 22 cottages. And on the main road where I grew up, there was 5 of them. So 5 cul-de-sacs or six cul-de-sacs with the same amount of houses in it. But like, as a community, each cul-de-sac were like a tribe. Do you know what I mean? You could leave your key in the door. I would come home from school and my mum and dad would be at work, and the neighbours would make sure it was okay. Do you know what I mean? And you looked after each other. You had street parties together. If somebody was sick, you did their shopping. All of that, which is all based around that tribal influence. Now, I know I'm old, like, but it isn't that long ago, like, do you know what I mean?
Well, no, I can remember that from when we used to be in Garryvaux as well. We used to have, our parents had a mobile home in Garryvaux, and there was a community feeling like that as well. Every summer, it was like, you know, like you had an extended family of maybe 20 other families that became part of your tribe. To a certain extent, when we were living in Farranree as well, there was a bit of that. And well, you grew up in, you didn't grow up in Farranree, you grew up in Grawn, I suppose.
Yeah, I was in St Anthony's Road, off Blarney Street there. Yeah.
But in the last in the last decade in particular, the big change is the social media, and now that we're no longer getting the face-to-face, ear-to-mouth interaction, it's primarily via text and message and Instagram and these things. So that's producing another layer of exposure to this kind of loneliness.
I was reading a book by Gail Honeyman, and it was Eleanor O'Philliant. I'm Completely Fine is the book, and the book is kind of funny because it's not. It is about loneliness, but it's not actually out there to teach anything about loneliness. But she's very, she works in an office, loads of people, and she's very high, good at her job, and very, has great interaction in the job. And then she goes home in the evening and there's nobody there, and she drinks a bottle of vodka. That's her weekend. Do you know what I mean? And how the story is about how she comes out, and she knows she has to put herself out there rather than be at home dwelling in her own thoughts.
Yeah.
So it was a nice book that way. I do think that because we're so busy with being self-sufficient and confident, or maybe more about what we have as opposed to who we have with us, that has created that kind of a loneliness as well. But I don't think people recognise maybe that they can change it. And that's probably where I like to focus, that it's rather than going down and talking about, we all understand what loneliness is, but it's about seeing how we can actually understand it and then make sure we can help ourselves out of it. But sometimes it's actually nice being a little bit on your own. Well, there
is, like when I was looking into the psychological aspects of it and stuff, they come up with three definitions of loneliness. One is what they call situational loneliness, which is down to what Liam was saying, which is the social and cultural and where we're currently living and what we're currently doing, which has an impact on us. Then they said developmental loneliness, which was, again, going back to, as humans, we need companionship, but we also like to have intimate relationships to a degree as well. And we also need time on our own, and it's trying to find that balance of having friends, having intimacy, and then having self-time as well, which, if any one is more prominent than the other, then that can actually affect how you feel from a loneliness perspective. And then the last one they had was what's called internal loneliness, which is where it's not where we don't have anybody in our lives, but rather we perceive that we're alone, and that makes us lonely. Do you know what I mean?
Well, it brought a kind of thing to my mind was, when Jessica was struggling before she had a diagnosis, she always used the phrase, "I feel like I don't belong." Yeah. And that was a really lonely place because, like, she had everybody around her. Even when she was at school, the teachers didn't understand because everybody likes Jess. But actually, nobody knew Jess or didn't know what she needed. So there she was in this circle and with all these people and all the time, and she felt so lonely.
And that's internal then.
Yeah, that she didn't she didn't
feel
in.
understood and
and that there wasn't with us they kind of like a box, and she couldn't find her box to put herself into, and that made her really, really lonely. And I think that's kind of I don't think that people realise that for somebody who is struggling with anything. And
the internal loneliness part is definitely contributed by, say, the likes of low self-esteem, feelings of self-worth, low self-worth, and then personality factors. Like, you could have, in Jessica's case, obviously she had Asperger's and we didn't know at the time, do you know what I mean, when she was younger. So that obviously expanded or made it feel worse for her internally without us knowing, do you know what I mean? And then there's also feeling worthless and you know, not having any coping strategies. And when they were talking about that generational differences today in the radio, I was thinking, well, what coping strategies had we got when we were younger compared that they don't have now? That's another topic, do you know what I mean, that we could talk on. Do you know what I mean? Because there is quite a few if you were to actually list them down, and they're probably, none of them are probably in any books that you'll find around like that, because they were just so simple at the time, and now would be looked at as being stupid or silly or whatever, do you know?
Well, that kind of brings us on to the next section that we were going to have a look at, and that is the types of people that we associate with being lonely, and then the types of people that we assume that could never be lonely. So just kind of as I'm kind of listing them off there, of course the notes are behind me, so apologies to people who are watching and I'm looking over my shoulder here, but so we kind of we tend to kind of put elderly people in the bracket of always being lonely. So
yeah,
why is that? And
well, I suppose like you with elderly people, like they you know, parents or whatever, they spend their lives with say a partner, and then they raise their family, and their family go on and develop their lives, and maybe somebody loses a partner, and then suddenly you know, I've often had people come into the gym and say, you know, I've spent my whole adult life looking after everybody else, now they're all gone, and now I've done nothing for me. So they're lonely because they might have, you know, they lose a partner, maybe have invested so much in their family and not invested in something that they're interested in, or maybe keeping up friendships over the time, which is very, very hard, but it's so easy to do.
And that comes back to like what you were saying, which is about finding that balance to have time for yourself to do whatever it is that you want to do. There's actually a syndrome, it's called empty nest syndrome, which is where people have brought up their family, and whether one parent, it doesn't even, the partner doesn't even have to die. It could be like, you know, my mum and dad are living together, I've gone and I've moved on and I'm raising my own family, and then all of a sudden my mum feels lonely because, if you think it in the animal kingdom, I've left the nest and I'm not tending to go back as often because of whatever, maybe I've moved country or whatever, do you know what I mean? So there is that syndrome, and that's where loneliness comes in, even though they still have a partner. Do you know what I mean?
But I think that they're, you know, we'll say, how many films have we watched where the husband goes out to work, very stereotypical type, like the husband's gone out to work and the mum is looking after the child, and they kind of lose that connection.
Yeah.
Because their lives are, you know, maybe one of them is too much about work, or one of them is too much about the family, and that they don't have that connection then, and then suddenly either somebody retires from work so they don't have work now anymore, but when they come home, actually they were so disconnected maybe from the home, they can't just come in and that's going to fill the gap. Or we'll say if it's a parent who's completely consumed by a child, when they go off and leave the nest, suddenly, who do I ring? Who do I go? what do I do?
Or there's that sense of what does life mean for me, or what's my meaning, or what's my purpose now? I don't have a purpose, and there's a loss of purpose because my purpose is gone.
Yeah, because I remember, you know, in transition year when I was at school, there's a fantastic organisation run by what you call it, the Pres School. It's called Share, and it's a great time now because like it must be really, really hard for them now, because every Christmas they start in November and December, and they raise loads of money. They're always, you know, they have the crib in town, and everybody, like all the different schools have time to go out with the box collecting for our Share. And they do, like, since I was very young, they've done an amazing job of building houses for elderly people who are lonely. And part of the transition year that when I was there was that I got to visit. You were delegated maybe one person, one house, and you would keep in touch for the year. Now I kept in touch with, I ended up with two ladies, Mrs. Loring and Mrs. Casey, and I stood there regularly, even after when I was finished school, just call in, like, and you know, I mightn't have gone as often as I did for transition year, but I actually always kept up the touch. I remember Mrs. Casey used to make tea, and it used to be so strong you could nearly stand on it. And she'd want you to, she had a lovely plant just on the window. So when she wasn't looking, I'd be throwing the tea into the plant. And then she'd insist on making more tea, and it would be stronger and stronger every time. And you're kind of going, oh my goodness. But, you know, she just couldn't, that's all she wanted to do. She wanted, you know, it's like, you know, if Father Ted, here, have a cup of tea. I'd go on, go on, go on. And that, for, you know what I mean, that was, you know, I mean, I was a stranger to her, but it probably was maybe the only person she might have seen that day. So, like, if anybody is around town, or even if they're not able to collect, it's really a very, very important charity that everybody should throw a few bob to, because they do fantastic work for people who are lonely, elderly people who are lonely.
Cool. The other one was socially awkward people. So socially awkward, I mean, to a certain extent, Jessica falls into that with Asperger's.
Yeah.
Even though it's a clinical diagnosis, it's not socially awkward for anything other than Trekkies. Yeah, like I'm socially awkward for that reason as well. But yeah, just disagreeable people in general. You know, like there's lots of like people who are just hard to get along with, and you know, the harder they are to get along with, the less people want to hang around with them, and then they become a little bit bitter about nobody wanting to hang around with them, and it becomes a spiral. So socially awkward people, that's another type of person. Anyone else?
Sick people, I think we have up there as well.
Yeah, I think that's very much like being like we talk about it a lot in the gym when people are injured.
Yeah,
you know, so a lot of times we'll say somebody is trundling along, training for a number of years, and then suddenly they injure their knee, or they put their shoulder out, and now the routine of meeting up with their tribe every like two or three times a week is gone, and then they're watching Netflix, and then like it hits. You know, how many people have we had like talk about that experience like in the gym here? And I think the same thing then for someone having a long-term illness or being in a hospital for a long time, like you must have had it when you went to hospital for a long time on Sally.
Well, I ended up in hospital for twice for a long time on having babies, but I'm the type of person that when I'm sick, I need to be lonely. I don't want company other than somebody I'm very, very, that I don't have to be playful, you know, or playing up to. So I suppose I would have embraced having my own time at those times. I literally, there was, I think, a text gone round, don't visit.
Oh, well, that was for Sally, so you might have felt lonely the first time, but maybe not so much the second time.
Yeah, it was definitely, like, I was kind of, I think, you know, for Jessica, you and I spent most of the 3 months I was in hospital, myself and Liam.
Yeah, because you used to go in and play the guitar and stuff. Yeah.
But it was kind of a lonely time, but it wasn't, it was something I really, really embraced. But I do think that at times there's a fine balance between what people need when they're sick or what people want, you know, because, like, you know, I definitely didn't want company, but then if Liam didn't come in and play the guitar, I think I would have been very lonely.
Gone down into that realm of it,
where
I forgot about that, actually. That's when I got the blue guitar, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah. Yeah. Well, I think when I had to come out of hospital with Jessica, it was there so long, we needed nearly van removal to move me out of the hospital, because like it was literally like the room was like my own room now. Yeah.
She had squatters' rights inside in the CUH.
But I do think that sick people, then people think like, oh, I can't go there because they're sick. I think that COVID actually.
Oh, definitely. This has definitely impacted quite a lot of people. This COVID and the lockdowns and stuff have had. I don't even think we've seen the devastation that has created. Do you know what I mean? In this.
But I think moment, even when people have COVID, they're afraid to tell other people that they have it, because, like, oh my God, like, they're going to infect, or that somebody will say, what were you doing? Were you partying? That you got COVID, like that that you were naughty, only naughty people get COVID or something. And that has created a loneliness, because people are sick on their own and they're afraid to say it, and they're, do you know,
not being able to visit people and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And, you know, we obviously know of someone who ran into that problem, do you know what I mean, quite recently, and it's a terrible situation to be in, do you know what I mean? People in nursing homes and stuff like that as well, who family can't go into them and stuff, do you know?
It is. It's absolutely shocking. So this definitely, this COVID has highlighted a lot of loneliness.
Yeah. And then we were looking at people who are away from home, and I'll give you an instance from a personal experience. So I lived in the UK for on and off 12 years at one stage. And if you would have asked me, did I miss home? I'd say no. Did I miss family? I'd say no. Sure, we're talking on the phone or whatever, do you know what I mean? And we visit each other and whatever. And I, in the realms of, never believed that I missed Ireland. And then when I actually landed in Shannon after 12 years, I just started crying. And it was like, I felt home, if that makes sense.
Did you kiss the ground?
It was Shannon, yeah. Not Dublin. Sorry to all the people in Shannon. No, but I just couldn't believe it, do you know what I mean? Because I was going, what's going on here? Like, do you know what I mean? You're a bit nuts. Maybe you need to go and be tested or something, do you know what I mean? But there is that realm of those people. And now with the COVID again, people can't come home from Christmas. It's going to be really hard and difficult for them, do you know what I mean? Living away from home, and then obviously I had my mum who lived away. So, you know, you would miss that connection as well, even though you were talking on the phone. So it has that does have a part to play, I think, for people psychologically.
I think what's funny is the amount of people who now are known to be lonely, and that you'd never know it. Do you know, when you look at Robin Williams, like he struggled with loneliness and those feelings, and then he was the life and soul of a party. So like people are very good at masking it as well, which is
Jerry Ryan, maybe. Yeah. Do you know?
Yeah.
And there are people that like you said, that when we look at them, famous people, we wouldn't tend to see that they're lonely.
Because they seem to have everything in their wild life, and they can go anywhere they want on a plane, and they have lavish parties, and they're on every A-list, we'll say, in Hollywood. And then, but actually it's all immaterial, because, you know, like that's what you need to understand about loneliness. It's the loneliness for people is that kind of,
well, it's personal. It's personalised for each individual. And I think that's the thing about when we look at, say, the characteristics of people in general is you would have extroverts and introverts. And extroverts would be your famous people, your actors, your comedians, all those type of people. But they actually suffer a lot from depression, as in, like you said, with Robin Williams. Just because they're extroverted doesn't mean that they're not suffering inside. That's their safety mechanism, because it means they don't have to sit with themselves. Do you know what I mean? And then you have the introvert people who don't want to be out front and centre and want to be retreating themselves, and that's their coping mechanism. But it doesn't mean that they're not suffering in some way, shape or form, you know? And it's trying to find that balance between both. And that's very hard. Do you know, like, I would be an introverted person. It would be my characteristic generally, you know. You would be extroverted.
Come here, I've seen your shoes. You're fucking not introverted at all.
But my shoes,
what shoes are you wearing today?
My shoes don't have to perform. I'm actually okay today. I just have normal brown shoes on today.
But I don't. You see, I think that's the perception. I mean, like, you know, we'll say people, like you say, I am a people person. Mm-hmm. I am, but then I actually really, really need my own time.
Yeah.
You know, so I like. You know, that it's great, whatever, being out and everything, but, you know...
But that is finding that balance.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But what I'm saying is that you would be more extroverted than I am. Like, I don't... In parties or groups, you'll actually have no problem standing up and be seen. Maybe the shoes is to attract people to me, to talk to me, because I feel so lonely and I'm introverted, do you know what I mean?
That reminds me of that joke, isn't it? You know, that they in the north side, it was like, you're so ugly, your mother hangs sausages off your pants so the dogs come and play with you. And you think your shoes do that?
I really don't know where you go with these Cork sayings. Do you know what I mean? Holy moly.
So
I'm allergic.
So one particular definition might kind of sum up what you're both kind of saying there, and that is another YouTube video I came across from a channel called Med Circle, and it's an interview with a clinical psychiatrist called Dr. Sue Varma, and she said that loneliness is a subjective feeling of not having connection. So subjective meaning that it's personal. What's loneliness for you is not necessarily loneliness for somebody else, and it's every person's experience of it is different and unique to them. But the common thread is not having a real connection. So you could have thousands of Facebook friends, millions of Instagram followers, loads of adoring fans, but no real actual connection with another human. And that may be the case for Robin Williams. I know Jim Carrey was very, very similar as well. As you say, a lot of comedians suffer from that because they in order to kind of come up with these mad stories, they have to be slightly mad themselves anyway, So, but what's next on our list of?
And so we were looking and talking about the psychological effects of loneliness on people, and you were looking in the realms of creating anxiety, which it's going to, because you also have that negative self-talk and the sort of connection between both of them, because one is amplifying the other. When you start having that negative self-talk, you're creating an anxiousness in yourself, and then it's like spirals. It just grows and grows and grows because one starts feeding the other if you keep following it. Mm-hmm. And you brought in the realms of paranoia. You had found something on paranoia, wasn't it?
Yeah. So again, this is back to the Kyrgyzstan video. I didn't follow up on the primary source for this particular idea that they were talking about, but they did mention that studies have shown that when somebody has a state of chronic loneliness, that their awareness of other people's facial expression increases. So you're more cognizant of, did they just make a face at me, or like, I'm sure they're ignoring me on purpose, or they did. Your awareness increases, but your accuracy of what that actually means decreases. So it always decreases. Yeah. So the perception goes to the negative. So it's a kind of a paranoia, and it's that kind of vicious cycle that you're talking about. So the more lonely you get, the more this creeps in, and then you become very defensive. And this is the defensive is the word, because if we go back to what is loneliness again, it's this release of a hormone. It's a signal that your body is giving you to seek out social interaction, but that signal hurts. Mm-hmm. So the pain of social rejection, that hurts. Like, there's an actual physical manifestation of that psychological insult. So when you're hurt, when you feel that pain, or whether it's psychosomatic or whether it's real, or whether it's a rush of a particular hormone, your body goes on the defensive. I don't know if it's
an emotional sensation. It's an emotional feeling or sense which is going to kick in. Fight, flight, or freeze is going to kick in that survival mechanism. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And you're going to go on to it's going to go on the defensive to protect you, and by retreating, let's say in the realms of, say, somebody who has a phobia for blushing, and people may laugh at this, but people have a phobia of being embarrassed. Like, I remember when we first when I was down in Unit 2, when we were in Unit 2 and 3, one of my first clients was a person who was a blusher, and when she rang, I'd obviously never experienced it one-to-one in real life, bar just case studies and stuff. This lady walked in, and I met her at the door. She was coming because she was blushing and she wanted to go for a job interview, but she had this self-talk, which I'm not good enough and people will ridicule me and blah blah blah. So her defense mechanism was retreat, be on her own. So she was effectively on a line worker in a factory, and she went to work, got her shopping on the way home, and went home, and that was it. She couldn't go to pubs, socialise, anything. And you remember the office in the last place, what was it, 15 feet from the desk or something like that? Mm-hmm. Like, so she was red when she came in, as in you could see her blushing and, feeling embarrassed.
In Cork we say she was scarlet.
Oh no,
Mocked
she was
her.
scarlet when she sat down. She was like, what was it? That red Ferrari out of what was that thing that Tom Selleck was in? Do you know that
Magnum PI.
Magnum PI? That's the colour she was when she sat in the chair. And I was even taken back. I was like, holy moly! Like, do you know what I mean? This is really bad. And that was her perception of herself, which is she didn't want to be ridiculed. She didn't want to go for the job and then be let down because she would feel she wouldn't be good enough. People aren't, she's not heard, she's nothing interesting to say. All of those thoughts had expanded in her awareness, which is a paranoia.
Yep. Well, this is it. This is the paranoia thing, that Courage stack. And I really recommend people to have a quick look at that, because actually that channel, as I said, they spend months. There's another documentary on how long they spend on producing each episode. So even though it's kind of cartoony, it's a cartoon with a lot of depth and a lot of thought that goes into it, so it's worth it. But yeah, the paranoia comes in on that one. What about the health effects of loneliness?
Oh, by the way, she did do the interview and she got the job.
Great.
Did she write you a testimonial?
No, I was too early in my in business at that stage. I didn't get it.
Sure, if we mention her name on
Yeah.
online,
Should be Martha.
should be marked.
Martha Yoda.
What's a GPDR? Rules and regulations.
Yeah.
So the health effects, yeah?
Yeah, you'd see people, I remember when my grandmother died, my grandfather died of loneliness very, very soon after it. You know, he had issues for years, like having heart attacks and all the rest, but he always got over it. But when she died, he just, you could see almost him giving up and lonely and nothing to live for. So I suppose the health effects, it can have a traumatic effect on how you recover from any
Well, that's that saying, isn't it? Died of a broken heart sort of thing,
yeah,
isn't it?
yeah. And people cry, and you know, it's harrowing to see people who would be very, very lonely and just not able to come out of that. It's a horrible, horrible thing for even people who are looking on.
Yeah.
So one of the other articles I read on this pretty much listed them in bullet point, and they're actually a bit scary when you list them out in bullet point. So long-term effects of chronic loneliness: you age quicker, certain cancers become deadlier, there's a higher risk of Alzheimer's, and the advance of Alzheimer's is quicker, your immune system weakens. This is according to this particular article, that chronic loneliness is twice as deadly as obesity, is as deadly as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. So, like, that would be something like that you wouldn't think of. Something like just being lonely would have that much of a physical effect on you. But it does make sense if you go back to the idea again that it's a signal that your body is giving you. You're lonely. Your body is telling you need social interaction, and it's flooding your body with a hormone. And if you don't, like, that hormone is supposed to be a periodic short-term release until you sort the problem out, and then it dissipates again. But if you don't sort it out, and it's constant, if the tap is constantly on and this hormone is bouncing around your body, that's what leads to kind of like a long-term inflammation. And there's lots of research certainly over the last few decades that link most life-threatening diseases like cancer, like heart disease, like stroke, Alzheimer's, dementia, all of these things, all comes down to, at the end of the day, comes down to inflammation. And mysteriously, or not mysteriously, or coincidentally, COVID is actually been linked to inflammation as well, or causes inflammation, which is the worrying side of the long COVID, as well as that what type of long-term effects are we going to see from COVID. But inflammation comes from chronic loneliness. So and that's not just loneliness, but like chronic hypertension, chronic stress, chronic anxiety, any unresolved, like even just worrying.
Yeah.
Do you know, any unresolved psychological trauma or psychological issues left unresolved will make you sick.
Well, like
Loneliness is just another one of those.
and look, there's contributing factors to it, which is you could tend to eat unhealthy. You might tend to not exercise as much.
Drink
you might
too much.
Drink too much, smoke too much, take too many drugs, whatever it is, and it is in response to this stressor that is effectively a thought, which creates a feeling, which creates a sensation. And like, there's a link between your body and your mind, and it's simple as that. Your body will give you information. That's what it's there for. It fights. If you cut yourself, it fights it itself. It automatically sends everything to that cut to try and clot the blood and make it stop and whatever. So the body it's made to fight off different things. But when you're in this realm of, again, part of that would be the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system, which is you're not hardly ever in a calm, relaxed, comfortable, okay state. You're in a highly strung state, which is your systems aren't working the way they should be. So it's going to manifest somewhere. So you're going to get ill from it. And you know, I suppose the biggest thing for us as we're talking about it is it's very, very hard to know when someone's lonely because of the individuality of it and the experience from each one personally.
But I think that not alone is it very hard to see when people are lonely. It's very hard to help somebody who's lonely because, you know, sometimes you can see it and there isn't anything you can do about it because that loneliness, we feel it. We need to understand we're in control of doing something about it. Somebody can't make you unlonely, can't make you in any feeling. They can't make you not feel
we have
that.
no control on anybody. Do you know what I mean?
None.
It's we'll come to the tips afterwards in maybe some ways that can help and whatever. But it's just to put it, I suppose the whole thing is making people aware that this is how bad it can get if you get into that chronic
And just
side of it, you know.
So like we're kind of almost there. So let's kind of continue on. Like Mario mentioned that you might know when somebody is lonely, but maybe not everybody has the ability to spot it. So what we need to do is kind of maybe list out the what are the signs that somebody is experiencing loneliness? What are the signs that you yourself are experiencing loneliness? So you need to be able to recognize it in yourself. Maybe you're numb to it after a long time. So like, you know, like have a look at these symptoms and or these signs and see if this resonates, or have you spotted these signs or symptoms in somebody else? And so will we have a look at the list?
Well, I suppose when you know, when you are lonely, you don't have a drive. You're kind of, there is no, you don't feel the point of it. You don't have that enthusiasm because, you know, if you're consumed with loneliness, you just feel that all consumes you. So it stops you from doing other things. So I think that's the major part of it, of, you know, not being able to sleep, not being able to eat, not, you know, all of these things that you can't do anything else. Because of the loneliness.
So just to go through one list, so another YouTube video. This one from psych2go.net, again, link in the description. 7 signs of loneliness, and the first one is insomnia, chronic insomnia, and not just not being able to get to sleep, but waking up a lot while sleeping. There's a lot to be said for, you know, waking up because you're just uneasy about something. You're just upset about something, or something is just gnawing away at you, and that could be just as simple as the loneliness hormones just bouncing around and, you know, slashing up against the side of your body or whatever, and causing you to be uncomfortable, you know. So insomnia is one. Anxiety, if somebody suffers from anxiety and they become during lonely phases, anxiety tends to flare. And also irritability, as an extension to anxiety as well. Is there any more on the list there that kind of that you recognize? Or
I suppose it's a bit of you know, when somebody is lonely, they actually kind of step back, and you might notice in yourself or in somebody else that they're losing weight. because they're not eating. They're
So the decreased appetite would decreased and increased appetite.
It's weight fluctuations rather than lasting weight. So
because some people can be comfort eating, or somebody can be not eating because they're distraught. Yeah, definitely.
Or do you know people who are sort of stuck, not coming out, not getting involved socially with anything or any social connections, and are binge watching Netflix and stuff like that constantly? What?
I binge watch Netflix.
But we're talking about in the realms of chronically watching them. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I suppose like binge watching Netflix is
there's a benefit to that too.
Yeah,
where you take time.
that's kind of time out. But I think it's when
we're talking about like chronic. We're talking about months at a time.
It's
weeks.
when actually you kind of go, there's not even anything else on Netflix for me to
finished
watch.
Netflix.
Yeah, exactly. When you
Well, hold on now. That has happened with Sky when you got Sky, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's nothing on the TV. There's 499 channels or something before Netflix came out. But and the other signs of it would be, you covered insomnia and sleep patterns, didn't you?
Well, I just mentioned them. Did you have other stuff on?
The irritability would be, maybe people who are always angry at stuff, always negative about everything that's going on, not seeing any sort of light at the end of the tunnel, but consistently. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm looking at the list of signs in there. I tick all of those boxes on a daily basis. So I must be lonely as fuck. But look,
I think
anyway.
as a human, we're all gonna feel these bits and pieces at times. But it's when it becomes prolonged and long term. Do you know what I mean?
And sometimes, like the grass is always greener on the other side. Sometimes, is it a bit like that we think we're lonely because we don't do other things, and actually, there's almost a little bit of thing that you need to actually understand all of these signs of loneliness to really use the word correctly, because you can be lonely at occasions.
But we'll all have a sense of loneliness. It's a human trait that we're going to feel.
Yeah.
But it's when it becomes prolonged is where it becomes a problem or an issue. Do you know what I mean? And you do need what I call self-time. You do need time on your own with nobody else, no distractions, and just being okay with quietness and stillness and whatever.
Are we ready for tips?
Yeah, I suppose we can move into tips, yeah.
Tips.
I was trying to think earlier on before I go into it, actually, when she was talking about the man goes out to work and the women stays at home and they've nothing to do. Maybe they should move to Wisteria Lane, like.
Wisteria Lane, is that the Desperate Housewives? Yeah. So, okay, let's get stuck into some tips. Now, again, like these are like we're only kind of making some suggestions and maybe compiling some self-help information that's already widely available online and stuff like that. But as always, like we're really just trying to kind of shake the tree, see what leaves fall down, and maybe it gives somebody that's listening or watching some food for thought, and maybe kind of helps to bridge a gap.
And I love if somebody has tried the tips and maybe they didn't work or they did work. It engages this conversation, because we're talking here from what we know or what we've experienced, but often it's an amalgamation of everybody's thoughts that start helping everybody in the long run. Nobody has the one answer, but so please engage. Tell us what
is
tips.
that on the FCPGM page?
Oh, he got it right. What the hell's going on?
I am not even going to try. I have to go fight coach FC.
Practice.
So, all right, let's start off with number one. So, number one would be, first off, you have to be able to recognize the signs and the symptoms of loneliness, either in yourself or in a close friend or somebody that you're concerned about. So we kind of listed them. That was the last topic that we actually talked about. So it's not that far back. If you kind of skip back maybe 30, 40 seconds or so, you probably get most of it. But just recognize it. Because if you don't know what the problem is, how are you going to start fixing it? Who wants to take number 2?
The second one then is working on combating that self-talk that you have going on inside your head with yourself. We touched on self-talk briefly before in one of the other episodes, or maybe a couple of the other episodes, but we have a tendency to beat ourselves up constantly, and it all comes down to, it's all negative. It's, I can't do this, I'm not good enough, I'm too embarrassed to do that, I'm too scared to do this, and all that type of stuff. And that affects how you feel from a self-esteem and a self-confidence point of view. And once your self-esteem and self-confidence start getting hit and get lower and lower and lower, it becomes harder and harder to come out of that sort of realm and begin to engage with somebody else to say, look, I have a problem. So understand that sometimes this talk that's gone on in your head, it isn't really factual. It's stuff that you're making up based on experience and stuff like that, which, look, we can go into another episode, but just be aware of the negative self-talk in your head and try and stop it, and then go and talk to somebody about it if you can.
All right, do you want to take the third one?
Yeah, because I think the third one nearly kind of elaborates from that, because, the reason we're lonely is because we're on our own. So I suppose that leads into the third tip, because it's really important that you make an effort to exercise your social muscles, like your eye contact, your kind of look at where you can help somebody, where you can maybe get involved with somebody who will help you not feel lonely. Now, this is where I'm going to put the plug in for my book club, because in the last episode we were talking about how I'm going to start the Gym Mommas book club, and I would ask if anybody feels that they themselves are a bit lonely. I would love if they got involved in the book club with us, because that is something, if you're not confident to go out and do something, to help with the loneliness, being part of a group of like-minded people who are engaging maybe in this case, reading a book and having an opinion on it, it creates, something that you're connected with. Now that can be, I'm delighted. The book that won is going to be the one that on Tuesday, I'm a Buddhist. So I'm really excited about that book. And so I'm going to give you, on the community page, I'm going to give you the details, how we'll all get the book and when we'll start discussing it. So that's one tip, is to get involved in something. And if it's the Gym Mama book club and I help somebody who feels lonely and help them connect with others, then that would be a really, really cool thing to do. But it doesn't have to be the book club. It can be, I don't know, some people are online playing games and they talk to people, but I think you need to come out and talk to real people outside of the home and get involved in a sports club, in a something that you might meet somebody that really, really you enjoy doing, and that you get to meet other people who enjoy doing it, so that you can create that connection. It takes effort, but that is what is important. It's better, the effort you try to do there will pay off a bit, rather than staying at home, because that's not going to make you less lonely.
Okay, so number 4 is basically it's compassion, right? So that other psychiatrist that I mentioned a little bit earlier on as well, Dr. Sue Varma, she had a great phrase for compassion. She said that compassion is empathy in action. So empathy is the ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, or even at times to put yourself in your own shoes, which is a little bit weird, but with your ability to be able to spot the signs and the symptoms of someone being lonely, taking empathy and just understanding that they are lonely, and then doing something about it. So maybe somebody that is showing the signs of loneliness, and that joining Mara's book club would be very good for them. Well, then maybe recommending that to them, or kind of bringing them along with you, or doing something like that. So helping somebody out, like just giving a little bit of a nudge in the correct direction. That's showing compassion, and that's acting on your empathy. So it's easier to do it for someone else, not so simple to do it for yourself, but you know, that is what it is. Compassion, empathy in action. So that would be number 4. What's number 5?
And then the last one is seeking professional help if you can't manage it by yourself. So obviously coming and talking to a therapist of some description, a psychotherapist like me, or a hypnotherapist, or a counsellor, or somebody in the realm of the mental health field that can help and guide you work through whatever the challenges are that you're facing.
So those are your 5 tips, and just to give you a little bit of a recap really, really quick. So number 1, recognize the signs. Number 2, work to combat negative self-talk. Number 3, make an effort and exercise your social muscles. Number 4, show compassion and patience for yourself and others. And number 5, if you can't sort it, well, then seek out some professional help. And there's no shame in that. Just like any other psychological hardship, there's no shame in it. So just go ask for help. Mar?
My quote of the week. So I have to get it up here now because I wasn't ready there.
Hang on, we'll go back to split screen there. So I think I had difficulty understanding this quote now, so you're going to have to help me to break it down.
Well, for me, it meant an awful lot. It's the real loneliness is living among all those kind people who only ask one to pretend. It's by Edith Wharton, and what it is I suppose it was, for me, it was going back to where we were talking about famous people who were lonely, because sometimes it's very, it's about being yourself, when kind of finding out where you belong is very, very important. Finding out what makes you not lonely is important. And sometimes people are lonely because they're in the realm of what everybody else perceives as the not. If you're
sort of going to that self-awareness factor and understanding yourself, and then and using that information to take steps.
So you can be with people and still feel very, very lonely. Yeah. So that quote for me was all about kind of, just kind of figuring out yourself and figuring out what would make you less lonely. Because I think that, it must be so, like Robin Williams, like to be so loved and so admired and everybody wanting to be with him, and to think that he was so lonely is a very, very sad place to go. And I think that is one. It is about being self-aware. It is about knowing yourself and what it is you need, not what everybody else needs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay. So it's about hang on. So the real loneliness is living among all these kind people who only ask one to pretend. So if you're talking about Robin Williams, Robin Williams is the one who's surrounded by people who are asking him to pretend to be happy.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. I get it. The penny has dropped.
You summed it up better than I. You got a bit long-winded, but that's exactly what it meant for me, and that's why it stuck out for this particular thing. So don't forget the plug. Please, if you're lonely, help me out with the book club. Get involved.
Check out the FPGM.
You're taking advantage of lonely people now.
FCPGM page.
Yeah. So look, we're going to be wrapping it up anyway. So look, let's go through one by one. So Jimmy, where are people going to find you?
So you can find me on www.apiclinicswithans.com.
Mar?
And you find me at Marlene Griffin, SPG, on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all the usual social media. But in person, you can come to SPG reception, and I'm always there for a chat and a cuppa. You know me.
And I'm at Liam OG Griffin on Twitter. And don't forget, www.fcpgm for all things to do with this podcast. So our back catalogue of all our previous episodes. You'll find us now on YouTube as well, as you're currently watching, of course. I don't need to tell you that.
And makeup in future.
So the other thing as well is with our on www.fcpgm, the links to the community page. So our community page is full of a lot of people who are listening to the podcast and get involved in a lot of the conversations that we have during the podcast. And this is where we want your feedback, and we want you to give us some feedback on any episode, comment on any of the polls or the questions or the assignments that we kind of post in there, and give us suggestions on topics that you'd like to see in future episodes. So go check it out, www.fcpgm.com. I think that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Okay.
That's it.
Do you remember the song?
We can't hear you. Right, okay. With that, guys, this has been your fight coach. What are we?
Psychotherapist and Gym Mama.
Right.
The song did it.
Anyway.
See you next time.
We either have to order takeaway or something, because I know I can't go another hour and a half without eating.